Hey, what's up guys? It's Emily from A Mom Explores, and I make travel with kids easier and more attainable for the average mom. Normally I talk about family travel, but today I'm going to focus a little bit more on motherhood, specifically my fourth C-section. So this is my daughter Beatrice's birth story.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Beatrice. Happy birthday to you. Yay.
So you might be wondering why I've had to have 4 C-sections. Well, it started with my oldest. She was breech, and the doctors told me that it would be too dangerous to try to flip her. So my dreams of a natural water birth went down the tubes, and I prepared myself for a C-section. I kind of made myself feel better by telling myself that with my next baby I would try for a VBAC, and I was really focused on that and was positive I could make it work. And the first C-section was an awesome experience, but I was still really looking forward to that feeling of natural childbirth. I wanted the story of going into labor and how long it took and the contractions, and I wanted to feel what it felt like. So along came our second baby, and the pregnancy was tough. Most of my pregnancy took place in Minnesota, but we moved down to Florida when I was 36 weeks pregnant. That was quite the adventure for sure. And at my first OB appointment at our new hospital, the doctor took one look at me and said, "That baby's too big for you. You are going to have another C-section." And naturally, I burst into tears because my doctor in Minnesota had told me that I would be a good candidate for a VBAC. But things are different here in Florida, so I fought for a VBAC. I really challenged the doctors and advocated for myself. So they said, okay, we will give you until your due date to go into labor, and if you don't, then we're going to have to schedule a C-section. And one thing I will say is that yes, this was my biggest baby. My belly was ludicrously large compared to my small frame, but I tried everything. I tried everything to go into labor. You all know the lists of ways to go into labor you find on the internet. I tried everything on those lists and nothing worked. So my due date came and went. We scheduled a C-section, and sure enough, I did not go into labor before having my baby, and he ended up being my biggest one. He was 8 pounds 10 ounces. By the time I had my third baby, the doctors didn't even mention the possibility of a VBAC. They just said, okay, you've already had 2 C-sections. This one's going to be a C-section as well. And at that point, I just thought, yeah, that's fine. I'm not going to put all the work in to try to find a doctor that would be open to me doing a VBAC after 2 C-sections. It's just too much work, and I know what to expect with a C-section, and they've gone really well, and I've had great recoveries, so why not? After my third C-section, which was honestly the best birth experience ever, it was so chill. Jimmy Buffett was playing as my third child entered the world. The doctors, it felt like a party in the operating room. It was great. So after my third C-section, they told me, hey, you have minimal scarring. If you wanted, you could probably do 1 more C-section. And so I said, well, we're thinking about having 1 more. We're not sure, but I will keep that in mind. So when we decided to try for a 4th, I knew that it would be safe to do so. Within reason, of course, there are always risks. Okay, so how did I prepare for my 4th C-section? Well, it had been almost 3 years since my last C-section, so I felt like I had some brushing up to do. So I went back and read my old blog posts on, getting ready for a C-section, what to expect and what to pack, and I'll link those blog posts below if you're interested. My mom arrived in Florida. She lives in Wisconsin, and she flew down to help 2 days before my C-section. We wanted to give her 1 day to adjust to the big kids schedule, when school drop-offs were, and what to pack for lunches and where all their clothes were located and things like that. Then we made sure my husband and I were packed for the hospital. I have a whole video on what to pack for your C-section. I'll link that below as well. And then we also prepared the older siblings for what to expect, because I was going into surgery and I wouldn't just be back to being fun mom again after we brought the baby home from the hospital, because I had such a tough pregnancy. I had a lot of pelvic pain, and so I couldn't do a lot of things that I wanted to do with the kids. Sitting on the floor was so painful. And so I think they were ready to have their fun mom back. And I just prepared them for the fact that, hey, mommy is having a big surgery and I'm not going to be ready to jump back into playing and running and lifting you guys up and carrying you after this surgery, after the baby comes home. Okay, let's talk about the birthday itself. We had scheduled our C-section first thing in the morning. It was scheduled for 7 a.m., which I was so happy about because you can't eat before a C-section. And with my very first C-section, it wasn't until noon, and I remember being so hungry and crabby. But with this C-section, it was first thing in the morning, which was awesome. So then we just woke up really early, got ready, and drove right to the hospital. We left for the hospital around 4:30 in the morning, got there at 5, because they have to do intake, you have to fill out some paperwork, they have to give you fluids and prepare you for surgery, so you have to get there nice and early. And it's the weirdest thing, entering the hospital, knowing you're about to have a baby but not being in labor, just walking in casually and being like, hey, we're here to have a baby. This time our hospital had all kinds of security procedures in place that they hadn't had last time, which is a good thing. Really having each person give their driver's license who's going to visit the baby, just for the safety of mom and baby. So it took a while to even get into the hospital, but once we were in there, we got in our room, we filled out the paperwork, and I just kind of tried to take a nap because I was very tired. We were excited about the baby, but exhausted from getting up so early, and I hadn't been sleeping well. Once it was finally time for the surgery, we had both changed into, I was in my hospital gown and my husband was in his scrubs. They took me back to the operating room, and my husband had to wait outside while I got my spinal. And for those of you who have had a C-section before, that's probably the toughest, most painful part of the surgery, I would say, because you don't get your support person in there with you, and you have to hunch over your pregnant belly while they administer the spinal. Needles don't bother me that much, so it honestly wasn't that big of a deal to me. And I had been through it before, I knew what to expect, so you just kind of focus on something in the room and try to clear your thoughts, and it's over before you know it. So that's what happened. It went really smoothly this time around. So after I got the spinal, they laid me down and they kind of moved me around to distribute the anesthesia. I think that's how you would say it, to make sure I couldn't feel anything from the abdomen down. And while they wait for the anesthesia to do its work, my husband came back in, and then they kind of poke you with needles to see if you can feel anything. And this part always freaks me out because they touch me and I'm like, I can feel it, but it doesn't hurt. And so I'm like, am I gonna feel this? Is this gonna be incredibly painful when they cut me open? So I'm always really paranoid when they ask me if I can feel something or if it hurts. I'm like, I felt it, but it didn't hurt. It kind of hurt. So they were really good about waiting until I was comfortable and ready for the C-section. The surgery itself goes very quickly. Like within moments of them cutting you open, usually within a 5-minute window, the baby is out, which just feels so crazy. Like they're like, okay, we're gonna get started, and then there's your baby. So she was crying her head off. We told them her name, Beatrice Hope, and what was strange about this time around is they didn't weigh and measure her right away, which every other birth we've had, they did weigh and measure her, the other babies, right away in the operating room, but they did not do that this time. They just cleaned her off, and then they brought her over to me. So I know a lot of people's concerns with the C-section is that you won't get to do skin to skin right away. My hospital, both hospitals I've given birth at, have made that a priority, and I specifically requested ahead of time as well to make sure I get that skin to skin contact right away. So I got to snuggle with Birdie right away for the first few minutes, and then my husband took her and snuggled her, and I just got to look at her while they sewed me back up. I also got my tubes tied this time around, so the surgery took a little bit longer, finishing after the baby was out. But once it was over, they sewed me back up and wheeled me back to the recovery room. Once we were in the recovery room, I had the same thing that I've had with a lot of other births, with all of my other C-sections. In fact, my face and my chest were really itchy in response to the anesthesia, I believe. So they gave me some drugs to counteract that in my IV, and it kind of lasted the whole day, but it got less annoying as the day went on. They finally weighed and measured the baby. She was 7 pounds 2 ounces and I believe 19 inches. And then they moved us to our birthing suite, where we got to spend the rest of the time. And at that time, my mom came in with the other 3 kids and they got to meet their baby sister. I'm going to make a side note here and say that I am incredibly thankful that we gave birth, I would say, 2 weeks before the coronavirus lockdown started happening. And I'm so thankful for that because everyone got to come meet the new baby in the hospital. We got the baptism done at church. And I didn't have to do anything with a mask on. I know some ladies are having to give birth with a mask on. And I just cannot imagine what that feels like. That must be just awful, going into labor and having to wear a mask. So, yeah, so the kids and my mom came to visit. They met the new baby. They all got a chance to hold her and sing to her and talk to her. And it was just the sweetest thing ever. And I'll say another side note here. My second oldest, Teddy, he's 4. While the other 2 went to meet the new baby right away, Teddy came up to me and he put his hand on my arm and he said, "Mommy, are you feeling better now?" Because he knew I had really struggled that pregnancy and I had been in pain every day. And so I just thought that was the sweetest thing, that he was so worried about me and wanted to know how I was feeling after having the baby. So yeah, the meeting went great. Later that night, my husband stayed overnight with me. I got the catheter out that first night and even took a short walk that first night around the halls of the hospital. I will say this C-section, I feel like my recovery was a little bit more painful than it was with the other ones, at least from what I remember. I don't know if my memory is just like, oh, recovery was a breeze with the other ones, but maybe it was more painful than I'm thinking. But this time it just felt like it was more painful than the other ones. And I don't get the big drugs. I just ask for ibuprofen because I don't want my system to be more stopped up than it already is after surgery. So all I took was ibuprofen, and I kind of wish I had taken the harder stuff, but it ended up being fine. I felt like took a few more days to feel normal again than it did with my first 3 C-sections. So I didn't start feeling like I was in pain until about a week and a half after having this C-section. I do remember being incredibly hungry and just eating everything I could get my hands on, drinking tons of water, and just really enjoying the snuggles because, like I said, I had my tubes tied. This is our last baby, and I just really wanted to treasure every moment of the birth experience and the postpartum experience with her, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because moms, we all know that postpartum experience, it's tough. You're leaking everywhere. There are baby fluids and bodily fluids everywhere, and it's a mess, and you're tired, and you're in pain. And it's not the most glamorous thing in the world, but it's still a special memory to treasure with each baby. So I'm trying to soak in every bit of that with Birdie. She's such a sweet baby. She's 2 months now, getting close to sleeping through the night, waking up once a night, and has had a few nights where she slept till 5:30. So she's just been a dream, and the kids have adjusted so well. I think having your 4th baby it's kind of nice because the kids were a little older this time around. They're 3, 4, and 6, and almost 5 and 7. So they've been so good about entertaining her and reading to her and singing to her. So it's just been a dream. Recovery has been amazing, and we're just really feeling happy and complete as a family. So that's my 4th C-section birth story. I've had really positive experiences with C-sections, and I hope that if you're preparing for your very first C-section and you're nervous about it, I hope this helps you have hope that your C-section birth stories can be amazing and happy, and it's okay to feel let down because you didn't get the birth that you dreamed of and you didn't get that going into labor birth story. I definitely felt that, especially my first 2 births. but know that this can still be a positive experience and you can enjoy it. And hey, if this is what brings your baby into the world, then it's a great thing. So that's my 4th C-section birth story. I hope it helped. If you like this video, if it was helpful, make sure to hit like and subscribe for family travel content and some motherhood content as well. We'll be talking about our big move across the country soon with 4 kids, one of them being a baby during a pandemic. Hooray. And you can also follow me on Instagram. I post all the time on stories there, and I love to get to know my community over on Instagram. I'm at A Mom Explores. All right, hope to connect with you soon, but until then, keep exploring.